a company called People Solutions. I want us to do the understanding management module, which is a module that we are going to be looking at how management works. How does management work? Yeah, basically that's what we will be talking about. It's a short module, and I'll try to be as fast as I can because I know you are busy people. All right, so let me share the screen without wasting much of your time, my friends. This module is made up of 25 unit standards. It's one of the heaviest. It has got the core of management that we are doing. Remember, we started with modules like learning effectively, whereby we're talking about the fundamental unit standards. But this time we're getting now into the core of management. Of course, these are the unit standards that we're going to be talking about. All right. We'll start by we will indeed start by the different environments, business environments that we find ourselves in business that you need to adapt. We have talked about these environments in the previous module, which is keeping up with current affairs. All right, so we have the macro environment, which is basically those things that we cannot control that are set by higher authorities. Sometimes they are set, sometimes they just prevail. We're talking of the PEST, P-E-S-T. Some they add a C for cultural. So PEST, P is political, economic, technological, and social factors, cultural as well. These are the things that we do not have control at all as an organization on, but we have to adjust ourselves so that we can be in line. I'm sure what comes to your mind are some of the organizations that have failed because of neglect of these and failure to adapt. Most of the organizations failed to adapt technological changes. BlackBerry comes to my mind, a company that was full of potential in the years around 2008, 2009, 2010. But all of a sudden, they lost their shine when touchscreens came, because they said touchscreens are a phase, they'll fizzle out. People will come back to the buttons. So yeah, that was the challenge. BlackBerry, Nokia, South African post office, etc. Those are some of the organizations that failed. Some failed to adapt themselves when we were having, COVID, etc. For us, it was really a testing time because we needed to adjust and adapt, to this thing of online learning. We're used to face-to-face. I used to travel a lot myself, but we needed to adapt. It was also expensive for our clients as well to book people in hotels, etc. That's the macro environment. Politically, things just change. Elections are coming. Things may change. Each party that manages to secure, a significant portion and be involved in decision making may have its own strategy, its own way of doing things that is different from the ones that we're having before. Previously, everybody knew that the ANC would win and the strategy, the policies would not change a lot. But now you may never know, so it becomes a risk and we need to adapt to whatever is happening. It also talks about the legal environment. We need to adapt ourselves to the things that are happening economically. We've got two things that we talk about: the monetary policy of the South African Reserve Bank and the fiscal policy that is implemented by the Ministry of Finance, Department of Finance. South African Reserve Bank controlling two things: the interest rates and the money supply in the economy. To help control inflation, fiscal policy controlling collection of revenue, which is taxation. So combination of those constitute the economic policy, but it also gets affected by other international and national factors that are happening. Like the supply of oil will be affected by politics, the fighting that is happening in the Middle East, etc. And then socially, COVID, we talked about it. Technologically, we talked about it. So the macroeconomic environment refers to those things that are happening that we do not have control over, but all we can do is to adapt. And then the market environment refers to what is happening in the market, the stakeholders that are there. We're talking of our competitors, we're talking of our suppliers, we're talking of those that are providing complementary products. They also affect us. The price of bread may affect. If it goes up, it may affect the demand for margarine. So if we making margarine, we may be affected by the price of bread. We also need to monitor what are companies that are producing complementary products are doing. And then we also talk about the micro environment, which refers to that particular those particular aspects of the business that we can influence, especially when we have got a constraint in supply. We may need to prioritize on the limiting factor. If there's a raw material that is not in constant supply, we may need to look at which of the products, out of the products that are using that raw material, which one is giving us the maximum returns so that we can produce more of that particular product. Okay, and then organizations are just but processes. That's why a manager from mining can be able to be a manager at MTN, etc., because their processes, all you need is to establish the process that things are flowing, and then you come up with control. That is management. If you're managing stock at Pick n Pay, you may need to identify, the process. People request for stock in the departments, and then you get quotations, and then you order. The products gets delivered, you store them in the storeroom, and then it's distributed to different departments. So that is a chain that you need to establish, and then you then say, okay, so at each stage, what is it that I need to be doing? That is management. What control factor should I need to be doing? People, should they request for stock verbally? Should they request for stock when it is needed that time? Should anyone in the department requests, or should it be signed by top management? Those are the what you call the controls that you put in. Of course, you may even put reporting mechanisms as well, to make it better. So that becomes the process. So as a big organization, there's a lot that we put in: the raw materials, the time, money, etc., which we grind to get the results that we need, which include profit, products that we're doing, services, etc. So organizations are just bad processes. Management is the act of putting people together so that they accomplish the goals, and managers are the people who do this. And this is the management process, which is the planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. I'll just try to summarize this process using this slide that is ahead. I'll come back to these other ones. This slide. Okay, so planning differs depending on depending on which level you are. Senior managers, they do plans that are 3 to 5 years old, in the future, 3 to 5 years forecasts, and the plans are more general in nature. Can just say we want to become the most desirable bank by this year. That's all. I remember the COO for this SABC, who just came up with a plan of saying, I want 90% local content to be played on the national TV and then the radio stations, etc. That's all they need to do. And then once they've done that, then they shove that general plan to middle managers, that are basically departmental leaders. So these departmental leaders now need to customize these according to their departments. Marketing manager will now say, what is it that I need to do as a marketing manager to achieve this? Operations, human resources, etc. When I was working at Prasa, they were expecting new trains that we see now, but they were saying new trains cannot just come and people are not trained on how to deal with customers. They're still treating them the same. So human resources came up with a frontline customer service excellence program, which is where I came in myself. Marketing was also doing its part, showing that the organization was transforming, etc. So each middle manager would now break down what top managers want into departmental strategies. And then once they have the departmental strategies, then they shove them down to frontline managers who will come up with day-to-day plans up to a year. By the way, middle managers' plans, they are 1 to 2 years. All right. So those are the plans, that are done, but they are still pieces of paper. We have done our 3 to 5 year plan, 1 to 2 year, day to day, detailed plans that we have. We need to organize them. By organizing, I mean putting resources, human resources that are needed. Do we have enough skill? Do we have the numbers that are needed to implement these plans? If we don't, then we recruit or we hire or we outsource. Do we have enough money that is needed to achieve that? Do we have raw material that is needed, equipment that is needed? That is organizing. Organizing simply means putting things in order and in their rightful quantities, in their rightful places, etc. And then after that, we go to controlling, which means leading, which is implementing, motivating people, making sure that you influence them positively so that they do the work that needs to be done willingly, to set the ball rolling. These were just plans and we did put resources. Now we need to implement. And then after that, there is controlling, which is just making sure that we have standards and we are meeting them. Where we don't meet the standards that we have set during implementation, we come up with corrective action. All right, so that is the management process in summary. Planning differs with the level of management, and then when all the plans are in order, then we organize, which means putting resources in place, and then leading, which is the implementing, and then controlling, which is making sure that the plans are going according to, the implementation is going according to the plans. And then management structures, we have got them in your training manual. Functional structure, this refers to the way the organization is arranged. Functional structure is the most common actually in South Africa, where organizations are divided according to the functions that they are doing. For instance, we may have marketing on one end, human resources, operations, etc. We divide the organization according to the different functions that we are doing. So it means people that are doing the same kind of work, those that are in marketing are just sitting in one corner, those in human resources are sitting in their own corner, etc. That is functional structure. We may also divide our organization according to geographical structures, like Cape Town office having being fully functional with human resources, with finance, with operations, and everything, Same applies to our Durban office if we have Joburg office, Mpumalanga, Northwest, Limpopo, etc. So we can say our organs is divided according to geographic locations, or it can be product based according to the product. For those companies that are producing many products at once, it may be done according to the products. Like Unilever, you have washing powder, you will have bath soap, you have detergents, so if the departments are divided according to that, then we can say the organization is divided according to the product, or it can be customer for big projects, those who deal with the projects. Like us, we can have a team for Telkom only, we can have a team for Aspen, we can have a team for Nedbank, etc. And then there's also what is called matrix, which is a hybrid. It happens when you have got an organogram like these ones we're having here, but we've got an additional department. Let's say we're using a system called SEP. We'll have SEP people cutting across these departments, so that each employee will be reporting to their line manager. They may also be reporting to the SEP specialist as well. So it's a hybrid kind of organogram that is called matrix. The example is there in your training manual as well. And then there is this thing that is called core and support functions of a business. Core functions are the ones that the organization that are doing what the organization is there for. For Eskom, the organization Eskom is there to generate electricity. There are departments that just generate electricity. That's it. So those are core functions. But you'll find that there are people that are in HR at Eskom. Finance. Eskom is not there to provide HR services, but these departments are established so that they can support the core functions so that they can concentrate on their core business. All right, so this we have discussed, but we'll also refer to it just now in terms of the skills that are needed at each level. Top managers, they need more of what is called conceptual skills. Conceptual skills refers to the ability to see the organization as a whole. At the bottom, you may only be worried about what is on your desk, on your computer. As you become a team leader, you are worried about the whole team. Your horizon increases. As you become the departmental leader, now you're looking at all the teams. Your horizon increases. And then as you become a senior manager, CEO, you now need to look at the organization in its entirety. So ability to see the organization in its entirety is what is called, conceptual skills. We also need what we call interpersonal skills. A lot is needed at middle management because they, the middle managers, they communicate with top managers, they communicate with low-level managers at the same time. And then we have front line managers who need a lot of technical skills. You may not need a lot of technical skills at the top, because at the top you need what is referred to as conceptual skills. So those are the skills that are needed, which will be explained here on this. I think they can best be explained by this diagram, to say top management need a lot of conceptual skills more than team leader, because team leaders are only interested in what is happening in their team, but your ability to see the organization in its entirety is needed more at the top level. All right. Interpersonal skills are needed the same, and then not much technical skills are needed at the top of the organization. They are needed more at the bottom level. Just 1 second. Okay, so those are the skills that are needed at each level. Let us quickly go to the next. So planning, I think we have discussed it in detail. Strategic plans are done by top managers. These include vision, mission, goals, and long-term objectives. Um, and it involves tasks, action plans, etc. Okay, planning helps us to save money, save time, because there won't be a lot of rework if we have done a thorough planning, and then which will need to be implemented. And then organizing, we've talked about it, but there are these terms that are there. Okay, that we need to talk about. Division of work, we usually see it in assembly lines. Let's say we make cars. You find there's one person who's just putting doors, or one robot. Now these days it's robot, but previously you'd find there's a person who's just putting doors. There's a person who's just putting the windscreens. There's a team that is just doing the tires, until we get to the end. So it simply means the whole job should be divided into portions, so that people can concentrate on one task or another. And then the next one is unit of command, which simply means that no matter how many people work in an organization, we need to have, command from the top of the organization. Each person should be connected to everyone. It should be reporting to someone on top. Every position should report to someone, except for the one that sits at the top. And this makes the organization to be connected. There must not be a department that works on its own, that does not report to anyone. It becomes a challenge. And then the chain of command simply means from the top to the bottom of the organization, that line of authority. Remember, you cannot report to a senior manager when you are at the bottom. You need to follow the chain of command. So it starts from the top of the organization to the bottom, that line of authority. And then span of control refers to the number of people that are managed by one manager. In some organizations like contact center, etc., you may find that they can afford to have 30 people reporting to one manager. But in some industries, you may not be able to do that. You may find one manager managing 5 people, 4 people, 3 people, etc. And then we've talked about first line managers, what they do, the rosters, delegating, who is at work, who is not at work, setting priorities, but it's usually day to day. The other terms we need to talk about are these ones in management, which are responsibility, authority, and accountability. Responsibility, it's the duty that you have to do. Authority is the amount of power that you're given to make decisions and to make commands, give commands, depending on the level. So authority comes with a position. That's why even if a police officer is so tiny, if they say stop, you would stop because of the authority they have. A person you're working with, now if they tell you what to do, you say, who are you? But if they are promoted to a certain level, then they tell you what to do. You do that without questioning. And then accountability is being able or liable to explain why and how you took some decisions. Accountability cannot be delegated. Responsibility you can give to your low level subordinate, but accountability, you can't delegate accountability. If the economy is not performing well, we blame the president because it's accountable. Even if it's ministers, even if there's a lot of corruption, people blame the president. Even if it's respective ministers that are corrupt. If a team is not performing well, the first person who gets kicked out is the coach. You know, even if it's the players that are not performing well, because the coach is accountable. You cannot delegate accountability. So delegating is assigning some responsibility to your subordinates. This needs to be motivational in nature. You don't just delegate boring part of your work, the donkey work, you know. It needs to be motivational in nature. That's the process of delegating. It's there in your training manual. Make sure you plan together with the subordinate, and then you also provide support whilst they are completing. You set targets, and then you provide resources and the level of decision making that is necessary, and then you monitor and review progress at the end. It leads to what we what referred to as the management by objectives, MBO. All right. And it must not be once off. It must be continuous process. Every time the people that you're leading should be chasing goals. There must not be a time where they just work. You know, and then when delegating, these are the tips. You must make sure that the objectives are clear, the targets, dates are also clearly specified, provide communication channels and adequate controls and support as well. Then we go to leading, which is all about implementing. You know, influencing people to work towards achieving goals, and they must do that willingly. So it means it involves things like motivation, being there, role modeling, leading from the front, etc. You know, power that you use. It may come with the position, it may come with personal power. Depending on your personality, sometimes you may influence. There are so many people that are quite influential, you know, because of their personalities in South Africa, you know, like Julius Malema. Politics aside, but when he speaks, many people do listen because of his personality. So many others. Okay, and then controlling, it's all about setting goals. I mean, making sure that everything, setting standards and making sure that our implementing goals according to those standards. If they are not, then you come up with corrective action. All right, that's controlling, observing performance, and then identifying shortcomings or weaknesses and coming up with corrective action. That's corrective process that is there. And then you need to provide feedback as necessary. When you're giving feedback to your subordinates, it's very important that you use this, which we refer to as the hamburger approach. I hope you have eaten already, or else you feel very hungry here. But all it means is think of your words before giving them, especially if it's negative feedback. It's more on how you deliver the feedback than you know, than the feedback itself. If you provide it, you know, in a way that is not acceptable, people may become defensive. So when you're giving feedback, you usually start with a positive point, then you sandwich the criticism in between, and then you end on a good note as well. For instance, if food has not been cooked well, but the person has shown effort, I can say, hey, thank you so much for the effort. I really appreciate. Oh, but I think you did put too much salt in the food. Next time, I'll show you, you know, how to put salt. But I'm so impressed with the effort. Please keep it up. I said I'm ending on a good note as well. But I've put across my point. Some are blessed enough to use sense of humor, you know, where everybody laughs, but the message would have gone home. If food is salt, you can say, did you use sea salt today? and people laugh, but you have communicated that there's too much. So it's not only about giving feedback. Most of the young managers, they think, if things don't go well, you have to shout, to your subordinates. That's not management. It simply shows that you are not competent enough. Competent managers think of the outcome that they're expecting. All right, so let's quickly jump to the activity book. Let's quickly jump to the activity book. Okay, so this is your activity book. Let me quickly go to the beginning of it. Okay, as you know, we always start by putting in our details. Name of your participant, your name, full names, date, you check on the rollout, and then name of the facilitator. That's myself, Ashton Kwaramba. And make sure you sign every page, and also make sure that you do not leave any question unanswered. I would rather have a wrong answer than an empty space. Okay, so the date to be completed, just check the date, but I would like to believe is the 30th of March. 31st of March, date of completion, and then candidate details, your name, your ID number, your signature, and the date that you complete this activity. Okay, on the first one, I want you to draw or to take screenshots of different organograms. Let's say functional. You tell me this is functional organogram, then you paste it here or draw it here. Then you tell me the advantage and disadvantage. And these are there in your training manual. And then the second one, you do another one, maybe product based, geographic based, metrics. You tell me the advantages and disadvantages of each of those. All right, and then after that you come to task 2, where you referring to the different kinds of managers. Junior managers, remember, they do day-to-day work, which includes the rosters, the day-to-day action plans, motivation of staff, attendance registers, etc., job cards. That's what they deal with, and the skills that are needed are mostly the technical skills. So that is the junior managers. And the middle managers, they deal with departmental plans for the whole department, if such as marketing, human resources, etc. Their role includes strategies for the department. And then the skills that are needed are mostly interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills are the ones that are needed at that level because of communication, and a little bit of technical, but not as much as the ones that are needed for junior managers. For top managers, it's mostly conceptual skills. It's mostly conceptual skills. They deal with mission, vision, long-term goals, etc. But you need conceptual skills, which means the ability to see the organization in its entirety. All right, so you're going to complete that, and then you describe the management process, which I think you would do very well because we've explained in detail. Now, task 4 is just referring to your own job. What job do you do? What are your responsibilities? And then task 5, you define these ones, the responsibility terms. We've defined them. They're also there in your training manual as well. Okay, and then task 6, you draw 2 organograms. of your choice. So you can even refer to the ones that you have put on task 1. And then after that, you tell me the relationship between those 2 organograms. And then of the 2, you tell me advantage and disadvantage. It's almost repetition of task 1 there. All right. Organizational structure that is used in your organization, you also tell me there. And then do you think this structure is positive or negative impact? It's up to you. I just want you to show your ability to analyze and see, relate organograms to the work that you do. Okay, these are the skills that we're talking about. All right, and then you tell me, compare the purpose and work of top management and low-level managers, etc., using those. Refer to these things that are listed there in your description. Of course, don't forget to sign your own page. Now you need to describe the management activities in the management process. You're going to do it very well. This one, please be guided also with those that are in bullets at the bottom. And then after that, you tell me about the resources that are needed in your organization, the process. What is it that you use? Human resources, the raw materials that you use, etc. And then responsibility of employees in implementing those goals. Okay, the role of junior managers. What do you do as a junior? Just a general kind of questions, my good friends. And then you come to task 7, which is the last one, where you are referring mostly to your organization, the business, the core business of the organization you work with. There are some documents that are required. They'll say put the vision, the mission. Please attach those as additional, and then you label them properly. For instance, 7.2, then you say organogram or objectives of the organization. So when you submit the activity book together with all the attachments that are listed there. Don't forget to complete your reflection where you're just telling us what is it that you learned in the module, what is it that you need to do to apply this in the workplace, and then other skills that you think are still necessary. So thank you so much. Let us complete and submit on time. I will send you another recording for the next module, but I would like to believe that this one will be the easiest of them all. Thank you so much. Have a brilliant day further. Goodbye.